Okay, guys, we are live. I just made that stupid mistake again, which I do from time to time. Okay, I played the countdown button, but I didn't play the live button. So
Yes,
here
thank
we
you,
are.
Madeline.
I apologize. We are live now, and Madeline Hoffman is with us, or was with us till a second ago, and Dee Pierce, okay, is with us. Uh, Good people, sorry. Andy Candy said she would catch us later. Okay, I'm sorry. Steve says he's got nothing here. I hope there are still some people here, about 5 people. So thank you for hanging in there. I'm sorry. Okay, I've been waiting for news about how the vote on the debt limit is going to go. And while I've been waiting, I've been referring to some Common Dreams articles that talk some about the resistance to the debt limit bill. And just to review quickly what we've been talking about since we have been talking, I've been talking, we have been talking. Uh, the Common Dreams in its latest news section, which I'm going to renew right now, just in case there is even later news. Uh, Here's a little bit of resistance from the Sunrise Movement. Our future is not negotiable, says the Sunrise Movement. Climate youth warn Dems debt ceiling deal is politically and morally dangerous. I wasn't going to go through the article, but that's certainly an expression of some of the resistance that people have been feeling. There's another article here, specifically Raul Grijalva, the former CPC co-chair, who has been working on the CPC for years and years, a congressman from Arizona, uh, said he was going to vote against the bill, decrying reckless hostage taking, unquote. Okay, the progressives vow to vote against the debt ceiling. I have been hearing that roughly 50% of the CPC is going to vote against this bill. I've also been hearing that Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader, has said he will support the bill. He has no hesitation, he has no trepidation, he has no mixed feelings about it. He's going to vote for the bill, of course, to save the economy, avoid a default. But he also said that everybody in the Democratic caucus should do what is right. So he's letting the CPC and other Democrats feel free to vote the way they want on this bill. So there's no internal power struggle inside of the party um, when sometimes takes place when a party leader tries to enforce party discipline, okay, with respect to a bill. So there are also reports that lots of the Freedom Caucus is going to vote against the bill, but not the whole Freedom Caucus, because Thomas Massie, one of the Freedom Caucus, and a very libertarian person, put one of his pet ideas into the debt ceiling bill, and so was persuaded to support it, get it through the Rules Committee. He was a key vote, okay, so he got to put his pet thing into the bill. Um, um, Ayanna Pressley, the congressman from Boston, filed an amendment to strike reckless student loan provision from the debt limit bill. that particular provision, it is said from Kevin McCarthy, is not going to get a floor vote. He's going to block it. So she's not going to get it through, in spite of the fact that it's really going to be bad for many, many millions of people if that amendment doesn't get into the debt ceiling bill. One of the evil things in this debt ceiling bill is that it provides for the resumption of payments. This is also Representative Jimmy McGovern, who is the Democratic ranking member in the Rules Committee of the House. He used to be the chairperson of the Rules Committee. Quote, give me a goddamn break, unquote. House Democrat slams food aid cuts as the Pentagon budget soars, and he has roundly condemned the bill as well. I understand he is voting against it. That's a pretty senior Democrat who is going to vote against it. I don't know if the whole CPC is going to vote against it. I pointed out earlier, and I'll repeat it again, even if all 105 members of the CPC were to vote against it, and all 50 of the Freedom Caucus members would have voted against, that's only 155 votes. That's not enough to defeat the bill. But there was one Democrat who is not a member of the CPC, outside the CPC, who cannot stomach this bill and is going to vote against it. Evidently, the word has gotten around to many people in Congress that Joe Biden had other alternatives than to negotiate this compromise with Kevin McCarthy. But he chose to have this compromise and to hurt people rather than use the other alternatives he could use, which we've discussed at length here, of course, in previous broadcasts, where he could have shut the Republicans down entirely. Here's another article. Climate activists decry pipeline deal with the devil at a protest outside of Chuck Schumer's home. So there's a tremendous amount of opposition to this debt ceiling bill. It's very, very unpopular. There's another one. It's on McCarthy to find votes for ransom package, say progressives. Okay, so that's enough of that part of it. What I wanted to say here is that it seems to me that the bill is going to pass the House tonight. And when it passes the House, it's going to move on to the Senate. Okay, no, I don't think Massey is the guy that assaulted the protester just yesterday, or a few days ago. I know what Massey looks like. And the guy I saw that was assaulting the protester is a completely different guy. Actually, Massey, I think, he's a crazy libertarian, but he's also a person of high principle when it comes to things like free speech and censorship, and things like that. And, I just don't agree with his principles, but he's in no way a sleaze. He stood up to the rest of the Republican caucus enough times, to persuade me that he's not a sleaze at all. I don't even think he's a mean guy. I think he's just a guy standing for some very stupid principles quite often. But anyway, thank you, Steve. What I was about to say is, if we're going to beat this bill, we're going to have to beat it in the Senate. How can we beat it? Okay, in the Senate, we have to focus our pressure, okay, on key senators. It's not going to do any good to pressure people who we know are going to be for the bill. In other words, people in Biden's pocket, okay, in the Senate, as opposed to people who may not be completely in Biden's pocket. Okay. We can probably trust that none of the Republican senators are going to vote against this bill, though this depends on Mitch McConnell. I don't see why Mitch McConnell would come out against it, because it's the kind of mean bill that he likes. It's not so mean as to completely blacken the name of the Republican Party, but it's mean enough that he can cackle a bit. So I expect he's going to support this bill and try to do a bipartisan deal in the Senate with Chuck Schumer, who will support this bill because he's in Biden's pocket. But in the Senate, of course, we have the filibuster, and this bill is going to require 60 votes. There's no way to get around it. Okay, so we do have that going for us. If they need, uh, okay, they need 10 votes from the Democratic side to get this through. They have one vote from Joe Manchin, because his pet thing, the Mountain View pipeline, is provided for in this bill. That's what the climate activists are really PO'd about, because that's a terrible bill. But going over the various senators, Kristen Sinema, who now is an independent, will probably go for the bill because she probably intends to join the Republican caucus at some point. She's probably going to be leaving the Senate anyway. I don't think she's going to vote against this bill. Okay, Mark Kelly had a close race in Arizona last time. Okay, I think he's not going to buck the administration when it comes to this bill. He's pretty centrist anyway. California, I don't even know if Dianne Feinstein is going to vote, but she's in Biden's pocket. She's in Schumer's pocket anyway. The other California senator is Alex Padilla. Much of his constituency would be hurt by this bill. Enough of his constituency that he might be persuaded to join a small group of senators who would move to block this here in the Senate. So count him as one possibility. Two senators from Colorado, they're pretty centrist. They're going to go with Biden. Okay. In Connecticut, maybe Richard Blumenthal could be prevailed upon to be part of resistance. I don't know. The two Delaware senators, Tom Copper and Chris Coons, are in Biden's back pocket on everything. They will do whatever he says. In Georgia, we have Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff. They might be worth talking to. I know John Ossoff, I believe, is up for re-election in 2024. The positive vote for this bill is not necessarily going to help him. I think Raphael Warnock, having just won, uh, I don't know where he would stand on this bill. It's going to hurt a lot of people who voted for him. Maybe he will not be so cooperative, but I think John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock are long shots to stand against it. But I don't consider they're in Biden's pocket. Okay, Mazie Hirono is in Biden's pocket and will do what Biden wants. Brian Schatz. Sometimes he can be a surprise. Okay, Dick Durbin, he never bucks Schumer or Biden. Tammy Duckworth, same thing. Roger Marshall. Of course, the Republicans are not going to do anything. Angus King is not going to do anything against it. Ben Cardin, Maryland, Chris Van Hollen, no, their establishment all the way. In Massachusetts, there's Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey. Those are two possibilities to form a part of the resistance. Okay. In Michigan, I think that Debbie Stabenow and Gary Peters will probably stay with the establishment of the Democratic Party, as will Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith. Though Minnesota has been turning to the left, and the DFL has been turning to the left, I still don't think those senators can be budged. So who do we have so far? We have long shot possibilities in the senators from Georgia, two good possibilities in Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey of Massachusetts. Also, Brian Schatz is a long shot possibility. Only really two good ones so far. Okay, I think Blumenthal, the two Georgian senators, okay, that I mentioned, okay, Padilla, okay, is also kind of a long shot, I think, but a real possibility, but still kind of a long shot. I mean, I wouldn't put any money, okay, on Padilla to join a resistance group. I figure there needs to be a resistance group of about 6 people. So the best ones I've mentioned to push on so far are the two senators from Massachusetts. I'm not just talking about now voting against this bill. Okay, in the Senate, where filibuster is possible, 5 or 6 senators, if they combine together, can do much to defeat a bill. That's an evil bill. So the two senators from Massachusetts are key. Probably Padilla follows after them, okay, as a possibility. Let's go up to the top here and get some of the other senators. In Montana, John Tester is not going to be one to resist this bill. He is very centrist. In Nevada, Jackie Rosen and Catherine Cortez Masto are also centrists. They're unlikely to do anything to resist the administration on this bill. Same for New Hampshire. Jean Shaheen and Maggie Hassan Okay, and Menendez is certainly very establishment. Cory Booker in New Jersey may be worth talking to. We haven't gotten to who ought to talk to them yet. But in New York, we have Gillibrand, who on certain issues has stood to the right of Bernie Sanders from time to time. She is a possibility to join the Massachusetts senators, okay, and Padilla to be four resistant senators. So, okay, is Sherrod Brown. So that means we have four who are worth talking to. What I mean by talking to is worth pressuring, hitting on about this. And there's Jeff Merkley. Jeff is worth hitting on it because Jeff is always in support of Bernie Sanders on almost everything. I think Ron Wyden is a little dicier, but I've now named, I believe, 5 senators that could form the core of a group that would resist this. The 6th senator who might resist it is John Fetterman. He was for applying the 14th Amendment. He might be persuaded to join a resistance group. I don't know where Sheldon Whitehouse would stand. I think Sheldon Whitehouse can be independent of Joe Biden from time to time, but I don't know. He's not strong when it comes to economics. He doesn't understand. I would say he probably doesn't understand that Biden could avoid a default even if this bill doesn't pass, is that he has other tools to use to avoid a default. On the other hand, Sheldon's a real good lawyer, real good constitutional lawyer, and he may well understand that Biden can use the 14th Amendment. So he would be worth talking to. Now, of course, who would be the one to lead this resistance in the Senate if it was to occur? I forgot to mention Jack Reed. Sometimes Jack Reed can be pretty lefty from time to time. Going through Texas now, nobody in Texas, nobody in Utah. In Vermont, we have Bernie Sanders and Peter Welch. Who would be the organizer of a resistance, okay, if the resistance was to take place? Well, I think here, if there's going to be resistance, we have to go back to Bernie Sanders. We have to pressure Bernie Sanders. He could probably organize Peter Welch and the 2 Massachusetts senators and John Fetterman and Padilla and Kirsten Gillibrand. I think I've now named 7 people who might be hit on, and I've given other possibilities like Brian Schatz as well and John Ossoff. The more senators you can get to lead a resistance movement to basically filibuster, the better off you can do. Now, here's something. Tim Kaine. Okay, Tim Kaine, of course, is a conservative, centrist Democrat who likes not bipartisan things, who normally would eat up a deal like this. On the other hand, Tim Kaine has been vocal against the Mountain View pipeline, which is going to pass through parts of Virginia, his state. And even though the governor, Glenn Youngkin, is for the pipeline, Tim Kaine has been recently supporting climate groups in their opposition to the pipeline. Maybe Tim Kaine could be organized to be part of a resistance group, and since he's such a centrist, he would be very influential in such a group if he were to join Bernie Sanders. I don't think Mark Warner feels the same way about Tim Kaine as Tim Kaine. I think Tim Kaine is a lot stronger on the environment than Mark Warner. I think the Washington senators are both establishment, and of course, then there's Joe Manchin. In Wisconsin, Tammy Baldwin might be a possibility. Tammy Baldwin might be worth talking to, about this. So that's my analysis of the Senate. I think at the outside, it might be possible to put up 10 senators to resist this. Okay, now remember, of course, 10 senators cannot block this if it comes to a floor vote. But 10 senators standing together and filibustering can delay a vote, on this, perhaps for some time. Tomorrow is June 1st. Default is scheduled for June 5th. If Bernie can get a group of 6 or 7 senators to use delaying tactics of various kinds, including the filibuster, he can block this so-called Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023. He might be able to block it. What I'm saying is we need to pressure the senators that I just mentioned to get organized and to try to do something against this particular bill. It is a terrible bill, not least because, as I mentioned just yesterday, that it virtually freezes action on the climate, substantial action on the climate emergency for 2 more years. And the scientists have just reported that we're about to pass the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit when really serious things start to happen in the next 2 to 4 years. We need these next 2 years to try to force important climate legislation through the Congress. We have to be working actively towards it. But if it's already decided that there will be no money to do the legislation, in other words, no money to make it effective. Now, what do I mean by effective? We need to be spending at this point at least 4 or 5 trillion per year on the climate emergency. We need to be doing that. I know you're going to say inflation, inflation, inflation. Inflation can very much be controlled if the administration and Congress are willing to do wage and price controls, after raising the minimum wage to a minimum wage a minimum livable wage, which is somewhere in the $20 an hour range, 2020, 22, 24, 26. After doing that, we ought to spend a lot on the climate and institute wage and price controls. How many senators actually support MMT? It's not a question of supporting MMT, Robert. It is a question of knowing MMT, knowing it well enough, not only that okay, Andy Candy, the parliamentarian has nothing to say about this debt ceiling bill. Has nothing to say because this is not a reconciliation bill. Okay, she's been doing her damage on the reconciliation bills. She's not going to be involved here. Okay, so just so you know that. How many senators actually know MMT sufficiently well, know enough about it that they would credit MMT? Ed Markey, probably Elizabeth Warren, but I'm not as sure about her. Bernie Sanders, maybe Sherrod Brown has more than an inkling. Okay, Alex Padilla may have more than an inkling. I wouldn't bet on too many of the others. I think a lot more House members were exposed to MMT than Senate members. Because, and I have to say this, thanks to Bernie, he didn't care to educate people the 2 times he ran for the presidency. He lost anyway. He could have done an awful lot of good if he had educated the public during his presidential campaigns about the facts, of MMT. He was in a terrific position to educate. He blew it because he wanted to keep talking about how taxes fund spending. So anyway, that was bad. Anyway, I've given you a list of senators to lean on Twitter. I've given also a little bit of a strategy. The first one we have to bother about this is Bernie. The second one we have to bother about this is Jeff Merkley. Okay, the 2 Massachusetts senators, the third and fourth ones we have to bother about this. Okay, then Sherrod Brown has to be pressured. Kirsten Gillibrand also has to be pressured. Tim Kaine should be pressured because he's made a lot of promises to the climate groups, and it seems like he really believes that the climate thing is a climate emergency. So, we have a comment from KRTD Media, who I'm sure that comment is from Shane Coughlin. It's time to cut the nonsense and end the debt ceiling crisis. The U.S. government needs to invest in healthcare, education, infrastructure, and social safety nets to provide for its citizens. It needs more than that. It needs to act vigorously, Shane, to defeat the climate emergency. Of course, as part of that, it will have to do a lot about healthcare, education, infrastructure, and social safety nets, because that's all part of it. It's all part of the Green New Deal and making that real. But we have no more time on the climate. We cannot screw around. We got to do it. Steve Wolfbrand says Padilla will fold like a cheap tent. Probably, Steve. I don't think much, of Alex Padilla. But he stood with Bernie on some things. And maybe Bernie can organize him on this. Shane says it's time to take action and remove the debt ceiling altogether. The negative economic impact is far reaching and affects not just the U.S., but also the global economy. Biden was in a perfect position to remove the debt ceiling altogether at the end of the last congressional session. In the lame duck, he had to organize the Democratic Party to get rid of the debt ceiling altogether. He made no attempts to do that. He might even have picked up a Republican vote or two. Maybe Lisa Murkowski. Anyway, it would have been hard because of Sinema and Manchin, undoubtedly. But he needed to make an attempt at it. But here, in this fight, he's had an opportunity because he could have joined one suit that is still out there, the suit of the National Association of Government Employees, arguing that under the 14th Amendment, the debt ceiling was unconstitutional. They were suing for damages, are suing for damages. Biden could have joined that suit, and he could have brought all of Robert Hockett's arguments in. Robert Hockett made a great case for the unconstitutionality of the debt ceiling law. I urge you to read about it. He's created a model complaint template, which we've gone over here in some detail in previous streams. That complaint template is golden because it can be used for all kinds of suits to sort of tack it on. It just gives you the case against the 14th Amendment. The case against the debt ceiling law, not just on the basis of the 14th Amendment, but a whole host of laws and constitutional requirements and constitutional traditions. There are 7 reasons why the debt ceiling is unconstitutional. Furthermore, if worse came to worse, it is possible now for Biden to just say to Yellen, break the debt ceiling, sell more Treasury securities. Let's see if the Republicans sue. Let's see if they can get standing to sue. Let's see if they can put up somebody to sue and then join that suit. Because the Republicans may not have standing. He could say that to Yellen and order her. Hi, KRTD Media. This is probably Shane Coughlin. KRTD is correct. Yes, this will set a horrible precedent. Absolutely, it will set a horrible precedent. But there have been other horrible precedents. For example, Steve, the debt ceiling settlements of 2011 and 2013 were also horrible settlements. They've set the horrible precedent for this cave-in. Biden was exactly playing the script Obama used in 2013 here. It was a rerun of 2013. There was a very damaging settlement then about the fiscal cliff that froze all spending. It was a travesty. Andy Candy says, COVID can't save us from the climate emergency again. The quarantine was so nice for the environment. The air cleared up well, and I got to see some wildlife. Even butterflies. Charity de Media says the government has the power to create money without borrowing or relying on taxes by taxing the wealthy and investing in public goods. Right, but in addition, of course, there is the mint the coin solution to the debt ceiling crisis, which we have talked about here uh, many times, most recently in the last stream. And the candidate says, I was kidding about the parliamentarian, Patty. Okay. And Shane says, removing arbitrary limits on government spending and adopting an MMP framework is essential to achieving critical objectives. Of course. Are you reading from my book on the platinum coin, Shane? This bill is ridiculous, and anything that keeps the debt ceiling is ridiculous. And this bill keeps the debt ceiling. It provides for another debt ceiling crisis in 2025 because it only freezes the debt ceiling for 2 years. So undoubtedly, the Republicans, if they still have the House in 2025, will come back and have another debt ceiling crisis so they can take another piece out of the safety net and get more tax cuts for the rich. KRTD meets it's time to get rid of any pay-go rules and any nonsense to do with debt ceiling nonsense. I think a lot more senators know MMT than we are aware of. That's probably true. I mean, maybe a few of the Republican senators know about MMT as well and are working against it becoming the framework that's used in economic analysis. Shane says, I think they know and they just pretend not to. Okay, I think here you may be overestimating the cleverness of the Republican senators. You know, when it comes to economics, they're not real geniuses. Some of them, of course, are smart enough to have read about this and to know about it. You know, like Mitch. He's certainly smart. And a few others have some capabilities. But I don't think most of them understand MMT at all. Andy Candy says, cool, Madeline. Character D Media says, the government's role in managing inflation is crucial. MMT suggests we use targeted fiscal policy response like investing in infrastructure and increasing employment opportunities. MMT also suggests various kinds of regulation over the economy in key areas as a very important way to control inflation. MMT also suggests that wage and price controls, if necessary, can be very, very effective. Shane says, the debt ceiling is a self-imposed constraint that serves no yes and damages the well-being of citizens. It's time to put an end to this harmful policy and focus on ensuring full employment and price stability. Full employment and price stability. Both can be addressed successfully through the MMT framework. And he says, senators can know MMT all they want, but if they take the toxic donations from corporations and industries, all is for naught. I agree. The toxic donations are as big a problem in the Senate as they are in the House. And Dump the Corruption suggests that everybody taking big money in both the Senate and the House and at the presidential level be defeated in 2024. Peace vote of 2007, that's Madeline says, and we need to cut military spending. We absolutely do, and one of the worst things in this law is that while it freezes domestic spending, it leaves military spending untouched. That's another terrible thing about this law. That means we should never allow it to take effect. Robert Copeland says we need to do something about the housing homeless crisis. And I got to mention, once again, I've said this before, but it has to be mentioned again. If this bill is defeated, it doesn't mean there's going to be default. In other words, if this bill were defeated, let's say in the House tonight, it doesn't mean there would be a default. Because the president would have 5 days to mint the coin, get it up to the New York Fed, and deposit it in the Mint's account from where the seigniorage, almost the whole of the whatever it is, 1 trillion, 10 trillion, or 100 trillion, could be swept into the Treasury spending account. That could happen within 2 days. Tomorrow's July 1st. If the president wanted to do it, he could have it done by July 3rd. He could have $100 trillion in the federal spending account to pay off all the debt as it comes due and to create a debt ceiling gap within just a few months that would be huge, because there's all this short-term debt from Treasury bills. In 1 year, well, I don't know the exact figure, but it's going to be 7, 8, $10 trillion in Treasury bills that would be paid off in the first year. It's a huge amount. It would create a huge gap between the debt ceiling and the outstanding debt. Of course, we wouldn't need to issue any more debt if he did that for a very, very, very long time. But also, if he tells Yellen to just borrow again and ignore the debt ceiling, and she does that, then there's going to be no crisis, because new money will be coming into the Treasury spending account. They'll be repaying all the debts and all the obligations. Everything would go on as before. Of course, the only budget item that could increase was the military budget. I know. These people are insane. They're risking nuclear war in Ukraine. They won't stop. They won't stop risking nuclear war. And for what? To hold back the multipolar world and victimize the poor populations in much of the rest of the world? I mean, what is that about? What are they trying to do? Robert, it's disgusting here in LA. Madeline, Peace Voter 2007, says, I think we have to accept the fact that he is not a friend of the people. I completely agree. He's not a friend of the people. He's an enemy of the people. He should be voted out of office in 2024, while at the same time the Republican candidate is defeated, because that candidate is going to be an enemy of the people too. Whoever it is, any Republican is going to be a bought enemy of the people. Homelessness and unaffordable housing are problems nationwide, Steve. Robert Copeland says, same here in Sacramento on a smaller scale. Kay Ryan says, I'm out of here tonight. I love you all. Thank you, Kay, for hanging around so long and waiting for me to learn that I screwed up again. Thanks for coming. And Madeline says, peace, good night, Kay. Steve says, good night, Kay. Robert Copeland says, good night, Kay. Peace says, I'm going to say good night, too. Good night, Madeline. Thank you for hanging in that long, so long, and for participating. Or even better, create the $100 trillion coin. Yeah, oh, I want that so bad, so bad. It should be $100 trillion coin. It should be $100 trillion coin. Uh, Andy Candy said, "Isn't the debt ceiling just more outdated gold standard rhetoric?" Yeah, right. Used as austerity propaganda to trick people into accepting austerity unquestionably. Yes, Andy Candy, you are right on with that. I'm going to change glasses because the print on the comments is too small for my regular glasses. Okay. Robert Colton says the air didn't clear up where I live due to all the forest fires. Steve Wolfman says, Andy, pretty much. Steve says, I'm more worried about nuclear war at the moment. Yeah, I'm very worried about nuclear war too. By the way, nuclear war, of course, is also going to exacerbate the climate emergency. Robert Copeland says, I say we go after the big corporations who actually fund the politicians, okay, in both political parties. Can't go after the big corporations until you get the toxic money out of politics. Because who would go after the big corporations? The people in Congress who were bought by the big corporations? No. We can't go after the big corporations until we have a Congress that wants to go after the big corporations. That's the way it is. Joe Biden doesn't want to go after the big corporations. He has told them nothing will fundamentally change.
He's making money.
Robert says, I went to the grocery store. He is. And the price of food has gotten a lot higher. I know it's gotten a lot higher. It's 30% higher. It's gotten much higher than the inflation. Steve Wolfman says, Robert, fast food has gone through the roof as well. I know the cure for that. Stop eating the bloody fast food. It really doesn't take that much time to cook at home. I mean, I cook about 3 times a week. And we eat 7 nights a week at home. I'm talking dinners now, of course. I cook breakfast 7 days a week. But I cook enough and there's plenty of leftovers. Shane says, ignoring the economic principles of MIT and refusing to raise the debt ceiling only serves to hinder. No, we shouldn't raise the debt ceiling. Shane, you're right the first time. We need to get rid of the debt limit law. It is an anachronism. It only serves to allow the Republicans to take hostages, to take the economy as hostages. Any Democratic president and Democratic Congress that refuses to get rid of the debt ceiling is empowering the hostage taking. The next time the Democrats get the House, the Senate, and the presidency, the first thing they do when they get into Congress is to repeal the debt ceiling law. Let the Republicans have that as an issue. Let them complain about that. And by the way, the Democrats got to go back to the old formula of, who was it again? Harry Hopkins. Tax and tax, spend and spend, elect and elect. And yes, tax and tax. Why? Not because we need taxes to get revenue to spend on anything. We don't need that. But we need taxes to take so much money away from the rich that they can no longer threaten our democracy as they are now doing. We can't allow the rich to be as rich as they are now. We can't have any billionaires. We've got to get rid of the billionaires. Andy Candy said, food is way overpriced. I'm down from a size 12 to a size 8 because I only eat once a day.
Hope she's well.
I hope you're well, Andy Candy. Bonnie says she hopes you're well also. KRT Media says failing to adopt MMT principles or choosing to raise debt ceiling would be a catastrophic mistake that would limit the government's ability to invest in vital public services. Shane, what can I tell you? This has been going on now since 2011. The first really serious debt ceiling crisis in this century was in 2011. MMT was there. Obama made a deal with the Republicans to raise the debt ceiling, but keep the debt ceiling law. He made another deal in 2013 for the same thing that was even worse than the 2011 deal. The Democrats made those deals. Now Biden has made this other deal. Shane, infrastructure and human capital, it's imperative that we reject outdated notions of fiscal responsibility that prevent meaningful progress and instead embrace a more expansive economic framework that prioritizes the needs of all citizens. I mean, it's ridiculous. Not just raise the debt ceiling, remove it altogether. We don't need it. Steve Wolfman says RFK is the only hope, and they will never let him in. If they'll never let him in, he's not the only hope, right? RFK has to be willing to run till the end. If they rig it against him, he has to go and run as an independent. And Kande says, be back later, kiddo peed in the bed. And Shane says, using the $1 trillion coin approach would bypass the need to raise the debt ceiling and enable the government to finance essential public services without political deadlock, as per MMT. Yes, in fact, using the multi-trillion-dollar coin approach would bypass the need to raise the debt ceiling and produce enough money, not appropriated money, but enough money in the Treasury spending account that the Republicans could never plead poverty again and would never have a justification for austerity again. So the Democrats could pass a lot of good bills and gain control of Congress, and the presidency, and limit the influence of the Supreme Court through jurisdiction stripping. And when they had that full control, they could repeal the debt limit law without fear of any political retaliation from the Republicans. That would be the last of the debt ceiling altogether. Creating a coin worth trillions of dollars held by the Federal Reserve would not lead to inflation or jeopardizing a nation's fiscal health. Yes, because that fiscal health is not dependent on multi-trillions of dollars sitting in the Treasury spending account, because the Treasury can't spend it unless Congress appropriates it. By minting this coin, the government could mitigate the political struggle and economic uncertainty of having to go through the debt ceiling crisis process and invest in crucial things. The U.S. government can use to finance the public interest and build a sustainable economy for future generations. I mean, it's a valid solution. Is there a debt ceiling on hunters, hookers, and crack? Thank you, Steve. Steve Wolford said, if they defaulted on SS checks, you would see a very angry country. Yeah, maybe I could get people then to support the Dump the Corruption campaign. That would be wonderful. Everybody would realize the Dump the Corruption campaign is in their interests in their best interests because we get the toxic money out of politics. Shane says, been reading your book again. Thank you, Shane. So, folks, I think we're along about 10:20. I think we've had a whole hour since we went live. I'm sorry, what, Bonnie? Yeah. Okay. So, that's a private joke between us. Shane says, $1 trillion coin is a great solution, not just from an economic standpoint, but also from a political standpoint. Yeah, I know. The $1 trillion coin, the $100 trillion coin, the $250 coin is really about politics more than it is about economics and about fiscal policy. It's an enabler of aggressive fiscal policy, but it doesn't deal with the specifics of fiscal policy at all. But it's an enabler, and it defeats the austerity justification for, thank you, for compromises such as the compromise we've just seen from Joe Biden and Kevin McCarthy. So, D,
Hello.
hello. So, what's your take on all this crap?
Biden's being the same old Biden that Biden always has been.
Which
Biden's
is
always
what? He's always been
he had
an SOB.
yes he has been. What was a nickname he was given because of being in Delaware representing the banks? There was a nickname for him.
Yeah, there was a nickname for him. Wasn't he representing?
He represents all the big banks.
Right, but at that time, wasn't he especially representing the MMT Bank or something like that?
Oh yeah, there was a particular bank, and he had a nickname association with the banks.
Yep, he did. I remember that. Yeah, it was also he who was most responsible uh, for uh, for prohibiting bankruptcies due to credit card debt.
Yeah, he changed over with his student loan debt too. He's always been Mr. Banker, always with the banks.
He's always been Mr. Banker, but I'm not sure that the student loan debt issue is there because the banks want to keep on collecting stuff. My understanding is that, uh, okay, in the case of the elimination of student debt, the banks would all be paid off.
Right, because I know he said that he put the rule in there as well that you can't write it off in bankruptcy, the student debt.
He did. He was the legislator most responsible for prohibiting bankruptcy due to student debt or bankruptcy due to any kind of debt.
Right, so he's always been against the people.
Yes. He's always been against the people. He's always acted like a Republican and not like a Democrat. This whole lunch pail Joe thing has always been a myth. It's a Madison Avenue creation. He was, for a very long time, though, the poorest of the senators, except for new senators who just came in. But for years and years, uh, he wasn't much on the take. When he started going on the take, I think it was in the early 2000s. Yeah, that was the funny thing about him.
Uh,
He rode back to Delaware on the train every weekend, came back in. He came back in on Monday morning. Uh, he was not one for taking large amounts of money, but he always represented the banking interests in Delaware, and also, of course, DuPont. He was very big on representing DuPont on local Delaware corporations. He was all for that.
uh-huh.
Andy Candy says, those roaches on the ceiling owe me rent, owe me debt, because I'm charging them rent. Unfortunately, they can't issue platinum coins, Andy Candy.
And the sad thing too, another sad thing with him, Biden, his choice for vice president, knowing that the age he's at, I mean, he could pass on in office. I mean, anybody could at any age, but I guess saying that he is older. Or we talk about Dimension being incompetent. Then he has somebody with no experience being his vice president. And that person would ascend to the presidency.
I know he had much better candidates to choose from. Much better candidates. He could have gone to Barbara Lee.
Yeah,
He could have gone to Karen Bass.
right. You go with people with experience.
With people with a variety of experience who knew politics and who were much brighter and more articulate than Kamala Harris. Okay, I have to say, okay, I don't know why he wanted to be president.
I don't either.
I mean, why would you want to be president if you really don't want to do anything to change the situation? I mean, what's the incentive for an old man like him to want to be president?
Right. He could have just sat back. He has his children, his grandchildren. Enjoy the rest of his years.
Right,
Relax.
right. And by the time he ran for president, he was a rich man. He wasn't as rich as some, but he was worth $15 million. I mean, that's enough to enjoy the rest of your life, even considering inflation.
Yeah, they
Well,
just wanted. I just think the DNC wanted a neoliberal tool in there. That
oh, of
even if
course,
he,
they
even if he,
absolutely wanted a neoliberal tool in there. And they figured that Biden was the only neoliberal tool who was running who might have a chance to win. They figured that Buttigieg had shown himself to be unpopular enough that he didn't have a chance to win. Okay, Harris herself didn't have a chance to win. She couldn't get through the primaries. And some of the other candidates were also just too unpopular to win.
exactly here, Judith, she's right on. Didn't Joe get pushed to running in order to stifle Bernie?
Absolutely, he did. Well, okay, actually, not at first. He was running on his own at first, and he was losing and getting
Yeah,
badly beaten. And then, okay, the neoliberal powers, Jim Clyburn, okay, and Obama, at that point, they figured out he was the best candidate to stifle Bernie, who before South Carolina was beginning to run away with it. And they didn't want to let him run away with it. Okay, anything more, D?
No, but it kind of goes in sync with my show tonight. It's like, we're all Palestinians, right?
We're all Palestinians. That's interesting. We're all Palestinians. They just haven't quite gotten to treating us quite that badly yet.
But they're getting there. And for some people in this country, they are being treated terribly. You have all this homelessness, no health care, you have the police brutality. So some people are dealing with really harsh conditions.
Not simply police brutality, you have police murder.
Yes.
It's much more than simply brutality.
And they're dealing with harassment, the constant harassment in their neighborhood.
Yes.
And we have the gentrification going on.
Uh, the other day, of course, when Bettina Turner died, uh, I learned that long ago she had moved to Switzerland to live because she wasn't getting any racist hassles there. And she thought that she would have a much better life there. And so she lived in Switzerland for the rest of her life. I think from something like 1992 on. Steve
Right.
Wolfbrand says, good night, everybody. When does the Senate vote? The Senate will be starting on the bill tomorrow. I suspect, and we should check right now, we've been on here long enough. I think the bill probably passed the House. It's probably on Twitter.
I got something about the bill online, but I couldn't read it fast enough.
Okay. It probably passed. It was due to pass. Okay. Okay, I don't have any notifications. Let me see if I look at the general tweets, what's happening. So Lila Charles Lee says, I'm drinking a dirty Dem martini. Grab some drinks and join us. She said this 2 hours ago because the Punch Up Pod was on 2 hours ago. It's a great show. Cut social spending, reduce COVID spending, great summary. That Lila tweeted.
Very savvy. Got it.
I don't know, but I will. And by scrolling down, there's going to be, if there's news yet, going to be here.
Yeah, Steve Wolfbrand says Biden plagiarized RFK's father. Great debate point for RFK if they ever had a debate.
Wow.
If they ever had a debate. We don't know if they're going to have a debate. If RFK keeps on getting more popular, it will be very hard for them to avoid a debate. But I think 20% is not enough. I think he probably has to be up to 35 or 40%, maybe even leading Biden before he'll get a debate. I haven't found any news on Twitter that says it's passed yet. Has anybody seen any news saying that the debt ceiling bill passed the House yet? Because I don't see it. So,
I
at
thought
this,
something came across my screen. Let me see. I
okay,
saw
you have
something.
any news on your Twitter or Facebook?
I thought I saw something come across my screen. Just how it comes across. Let me just go look up something. Let me just see.
Okay, go ahead. There's nothing on Common Dreams about it yet. You'd think they'd be ready to put out something immediately.
Okay, CNN has live updates. House passes U.S. debt ceiling bill.
Okay, what was the vote? Did CNN
Oh,
say?
okay. It doesn't say right now. I have to look it up. I'll look into it. Biden praises House for passing debt limit deal. Let me see. Okay, here it is. 314 to 117 with 71 Republicans and 46 Democrats voting against the bill.
Yeah. Uh, how many Republicans voted against it? 71?
Yes.
Oh, wow. That was more Republicans than I expected. And 46 was less Democrats than I expected.
Right. And there was something about the billionaires are having a fit because they didn't like the part about not getting enough tax cuts.
Oh, poor little billionaires. Okay, I think I'm going to say goodnight.
Okay.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yes, and thank you. Thank you for having me, Joe.
My
And
pleasure.
remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share. And buy Joe a coffee, please.
Oh, and buy D coffee too.
It's D for peace, 1U. Uh, it, they gave me that title or name.
D for peace, 1U. Okay, and mine is at joe.firestone. In other words, buy me a coffee, / joe.firestone. And my
Well, thank you.
Patreon is very similar. It's actually patreon.com / Joe_Firestone
Yeah,
instead of
Judith said
Joe.Firestone.
we love you guys. That is so nice. We love
Yeah,
you,
thank
Judith.
you, Judy.
And Steve Wolfbrand, of course. Kamala's only experience is sleeping with Willie Brown.
Yep, Steve. Her other experience is sending people from the prisons in to fight the forest fires
And paying them $1 an hour.
and paying them $1 an hour and refusing to let them out of prison when their time ended because they were needed for fighting the forest fires.
We never heard if any one of them died. doing that.
Yeah, we never heard of them. We never heard whether any one of them died.
I never liked the way she
But
treated
in the
black
process of fighting the forest fires,
Yeah,
he
Steve
says,
said it
thank you.
passed
It
the
passed
House.
the
The Senate has
House,
yet to
and
vote.
the Senate is yes to vote. Yes, it passed to the House, as we just said, with 71 Republicans voting against it and 46 Democrats voting against it. So the Democrats are more responsible for passing this shit sandwich than the Republicans are. That's why we have to dump the corruption. We have to dump the corruption in both parties. By the way, my friend Sam Vega uh, just said something online about the dump the corruption idea. What he said was, uh, thanks, Joe. The no mega donations pledge can't work. Well, I never said it should be a pledge. I never said anybody should pledge that. I'm not for doing pledges. But then he also said candidates who defect get a better chance to win the election. Well, that depends on whether the movement to vote against candidates who defect gets to be very, very popular. It gets to be very, very popular. They're doomed when they run. Then he says voters who defect get a chance to choose between candidates who can win. Well, why did they want to choose between candidates who can win since the candidates in both parties are bought by the big money and therefore do not represent their interests? We have 70% of voters who want a Medicare for All bill passed. They can't get one passed because the candidates are bought. If they want to get a Medicare for All bill passed, they have to dump the corruption. Because if they don't, they'll never get it passed. They'll never get a climate emergency bill passed. They'll never get another dozen things they need passed unless they do dump the corruptions. This was in reply to me when I asked Sam, uh, what do they gain from defection, Sam? I think they lose stopping the influence of toxic money. They gain very little as far as I can see. What do you see them gaining? The opportunity to support one of two political parties that have been largely screwing them for decades? And that's how he replied. Thanks, Joe. The no mega donations pledge can't work. I didn't say anything about a pledge. Candidates who defect get a better chance to win the election. Voters who defect get a chance to choose between candidates who can win because big money wins. And then he cites open secrets. Money doesn't always equal victory, but it usually does. I know that. That's why I'm trying to get the big money out. That's
Mm-hmm.
why I'm trying to make it toxic. That's why I am trying to do the dump the corruption campaign. Then he says, worse, no mega donations hurts us. Republicans get countless donations from the scared, angry, resentful voters that you mentioned up thread. We don't. Republicans have skillfully disinformed them for decades. So, in other words, Sam Vega thinks that the Republicans will not vote according to the dump the corruption rule, because they've been disinformed so severely that they will just vote for people taking the big money donations anyway. But there's a reason why I don't really believe this. And the reason why I don't is because I see all those angry and frustrated people from the Republican Party extremely angry at their congresspeople all the time. And dump the corruption gives them a chance to get back at those congresspeople. It channels their anger and their frustration, okay, into a useful channel, namely the channel of getting rid of Republican incumbents who have been screwing them in various ways, who have not been representing them. So that's why I think that Sam is wrong about that. So, okay, I think that's it for tonight. I am now going to say good night.
Yes, good night, everybody.
I
Thank
have to
you.
remind you that I probably will not see you tomorrow. Look for me in case, but I probably won't see you tomorrow. My granddaughter is graduating from high school, and I expect to be spending the whole day on that.
Great, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I don't think I'm going to have time for a show tomorrow night, but uh, I'm going to have a Saturday show instead.
That sounds great.
So I'll be doing one Saturday, okay, at 9. So, D, if you do a Saturday show, we can still have the 8 and 9 o'clock thing going on Saturday, this coming Saturday, anyway.
Okay.
Okay,
good.
everybody, that's what we think. That's the final farewell for the evening. Thanks for hanging in there so long. Remember, pressure those senators. There's at least a chance that if Bernie wants to do it, he can get 5 or 6 or 8 senators organized to block this bill in the Senate. Obviously, there were plenty of people in the House, okay, who were against it.
Mhm.
There should be plenty of senators also who think it might be good to jam Joe Biden up against the wall. Everybody knows Joe Biden can use the 14th. He can use to mint the coin. He can use consoles, perpetual bonds, in order to avoid the default. He doesn't have to do this. He doesn't have to hurt all these people. He doesn't have to make it better for the rich. He doesn't have to make it better for the warmongers. I guess before I sign off, there was just this little recent thing from Lila. She just did a very nice thing here. Let me see. Okay, let me see if I can get her thing back. Lila. Let's see. Back, Lila. Okay, I missed it. She had a very good summary. Okay, recently of all the bad things in the bill. It's an evil bill, and the bad things on it, okay, a myriad. We really got to defeat this bill. So, on that note, I'm going to say goodbye for tonight. Good
Yes.
night.
Good night, everybody.
Okay.
I'm gonna heat up my coffee.